I always thought my marriage was strong. My wife and I had our ups and downs, but I trusted her completely. That is until I started noticing small signs of something wrong, behaviors that didn't add up. She became secretive, distant, and her excuses seemed less believable by the day. At first, I tried to brush it off, but deep down, I knew something was changing. What I didn't know was how far that change had gone until I uncovered the truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I always believed I had a strong marriage. My wife and I had faced our share of ups and downs, but I trusted her completely. I never doubted her commitment, thinking we shared a bond built on honesty and respect. But then, little by little, things started to feel off. Her behavior grew distant, and she became unusually secretive. She was constantly on her phone, her screen always turned away from me, and she began coming home later than usual with vague, flimsy excuses. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. We all go through rough patches. But the inconsistencies started to pile up, and I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that something was wrong. My mind raced with questions I was too afraid to confront. The woman I thought I knew was slipping away, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial in our relationship. I tried to push my doubts aside, convincing myself that I was overreacting. But despite my efforts, a nagging feeling lingered. My instincts told me that something was off. Each unexplained absence, each moment she turned her phone away, fed the growing suspicion that there was more happening than she was letting on. Reluctantly, I decided to pay closer attention. I wanted to believe I was wrong, that this was just a passing phase. But as I watched her behavior more closely, my heart prepared for the possibility that our marriage wasn't what I thought it was. Quietly, I began bracing myself for the truth, whatever it might be. One day, while she was in the shower, I finally gave in to my suspicions and checked her phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages, hoping to find something that would reassure me. But instead, I discovered texts from another man, filled with affectionate words and details about their secret meetups. Each message painted a picture I could hardly bear to see. My heart sank as the reality set in. She wasn't just drifting away, she was actively lying to me, betraying the trust I had placed in her every single day. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Our marriage was far from what I thought it was. I had been blind to the truth, but now there was no denying it. The life I thought we shared had been a facade, shattered in an instant. The shock hit me like a wave, quickly giving way to a surge of anger I couldn't contain. This wasn't just a mistake or a lapse in judgment. She had knowingly gone behind my back, repeatedly lying and betraying the trust that formed the foundation of our marriage. Each affectionate message from her secret life felt like a slap in the face, a reminder of the disrespect she'd shown me in the life we'd built together. I knew I couldn't ignore this or pretend it hadn't happened. Every bit of love I'd given her felt like it had been trampled on, and I couldn't simply walk away without addressing the harm she'd caused. She needed to understand the gravity of her actions and face the consequences of the choices she'd made. This was no longer about just holding on to a broken relationship. It was about reclaiming my dignity. As I mulled over my options, the idea of a private confrontation crossed my mind. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt wrong. The betrayal wasn't something that could be resolved behind closed doors. It was too deep, too profound for a quiet, measured conversation. She hadn't just hurt me, she had openly disrespected everything we had built. Our relationship, our trust, and everything I had believed in was shattered. It wasn't just an argument or a mistake. It was a deliberate act that cut straight to the core of who I was. A simple confrontation felt inadequate to convey the weight of her actions. I needed to make sure she understood just how much she had taken from me. Words alone couldn't capture the hurt, and I wasn't sure what else would. I wanted her to fully understand the depth of the pain she had caused, to feel the shock of facing her lies the way I had. I realized the only way to show her the true impact of her choices was to expose the truth as publicly as she had deceived me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about finally being heard and reclaiming my self-respect. I knew exactly how I would reveal everything, ensuring she could no longer deny or minimize what she had done. I decided to confront her in front of our neighbors, the very people she'd always been eager to impress. They saw us as the perfect couple, and she loved that image. But if she wasn't ashamed to betray me behind closed doors, I saw no reason she should be spared from facing the truth openly. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences and that I wasn't willing to quietly bear the weight of her deceit any longer. Carefully, I began planning the moment. I gathered the evidence, bracing myself for the confrontation that would break the illusion she had worked so hard to maintain. It was painful to think of everything falling apart publicly, but I knew that hiding this betrayal would only prolong the damage. This was my chance to reclaim my dignity and reveal the reality behind the facade, ensuring she faced the impact of her choices. I waited for the perfect moment, a weekend gathering when several neighbors were outside, chatting and enjoying the evening. Taking a deep breath, I approached her and, in front of everyone, calmly confronted her about the affair. I revealed each detail, showing the proof I had gathered, exposing the deception she had hidden behind her smiles and pleasantries. My voice was steady but firm, and the shock on her face was undeniable. She hadn't expected me to uncover the truth, let alone reveal it so openly. Our neighbors, who had always seen us as the picture-perfect couple, stood in stunned silence as the reality unfolded before them. The disbelief in their eyes reflected the enormity of her betrayal. At that moment, she was finally forced to confront the impact of her actions, her carefully crafted facade shattered for all to see. Right then and there, I told her she was no longer welcome in my home. The shock in her eyes quickly turned to desperation as she realized I wasn't bluffing. She began pleading, trying to sway me with apologies and excuses. But I'd heard enough. For once, I stood my ground, refusing to let her manipulate me with words that no longer held any meaning. If you've ever been in a situation where you question someone's loyalty, don't let doubt fester. Trust your instincts. Sometimes the hardest thing is confronting the truth, but it's the only way to reclaim your life and your self-respect. If you've ever had to make a tough decision in a relationship, what did you do to take back your power? As she went inside to pack her things, a wave of relief and strength washed over me. The burden I had carried for so long was finally lifting. A few of my neighbors came by, offering their support, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this. Their presence made all the difference in that moment of transition. I had broken free from her control, reclaiming not only my home, but also my self-respect. It was painful to see it end this way, but there was no turning back. The relationship that had once defined so much of my life was over, and with it, the chains that had kept me confined. The sense of liberation was undeniable. I was done living in the shadows of betrayal. The future, uncertain as it was, felt brighter. It was time to move forward, no longer haunted by the past. In the days that followed, I took time to process everything: the pain, the betrayal, and the relief. I had moments of hurt and anger, but mixed with that was a renewed sense of pride. Standing up for myself hadn't been easy, but it was necessary. Confronting her openly had given me back a dignity I hadn't realized I'd lost. Her humiliation was simply the consequence of her own choices, and I didn't regret making her face the truth. The sadness lingered, but so did a feeling of justification, knowing I'd done what was right for myself. Each day I felt stronger, realizing I deserved honesty and respect in a relationship. This experience had been brutal, but it taught me something invaluable. I now knew my worth, and I was no longer willing to settle for anything less. With my self-respect intact, I was able to move forward, focusing on rebuilding my life. The pain of the betrayal still stung, but it no longer defined me. I knew I deserved more honesty, more loyalty, and more respect. I began surrounding myself with people who truly valued me, friends and family, who had my back and encouraged me to embrace a future without the fear of being betrayed again. As the days passed, I began to feel a sense of relief I hadn't known in years. Shedding the weight of that toxic relationship allowed me to breathe again, free from the constant strain. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I realized that despite the hurt, I had gained a new sense of strength. For the first time in a long while, the world felt full of possibilities. I no longer saw myself as defined by the past. The future seemed open, inviting even. I could move forward without the shadows of doubt and fear that had once held me back. I was ready for a fresh start, no longer tied to someone who had drained my spirit, I had the freedom to shape my own destiny, a destiny grounded in trust, respect, and the peace I had worked so hard to reclaim. The pain of betrayal is undeniable, but so is the strength that comes from facing it head on. In the aftermath, I found myself with a renewed sense of self-respect, ready to embrace a future free of lies. Moving forward wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The lesson was clear. No one deserves to live in the shadow of someone else's deceit. Reclaim your dignity, trust your instincts, and take control of your own story, because your peace is worth the fight.